They laughed at the black cashier, then froze when she solved the CEO's dilemma. The black sedan pulled into the parking lot of Harper's Grocery at exactly 7:23 a.m., its engine purring softly before falling silent. Thomas Harper sat behind the wheel for a moment, adjusting the baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. The man who commanded boardrooms filled with Fortune 500 executives now wore a faded denim jacket and scuffed sneakers, a far cry from his usual $3,000 suits. He had done this before, but never when the stakes were this high. The quarterly report sitting in his briefcase painted a grim picture: profits down 23%, operational costs spiraling out of control, and worst of all, customer satisfaction ratings plummeting to an all-time low. The board meeting scheduled for next week would determine whether Harper's Grocery, the empire he had built from a single store 30 years ago, would survive another quarter. The automatic doors whooshed open, greeting him with the familiar scent of fresh bread and floor cleaner. But Thomas Harper wasn't here for nostalgia. He was here to find answers, and he had learned long ago that the truth lived in the trenches, not the executive suites. "Good morning, welcome to Harper's," chirped a young employee restocking bananas. The name tag read, "Kevin," and his smile seemed genuine enough. Thomas nodded, grabbing a shopping cart and beginning his carefully planned reconnaissance mission. The first thing he noticed was the staffing. 3 cashiers for what should have been the morning rush, with lines already forming at each register. He watched as customers shifted impatiently, checking their phones and glancing at their watches. One woman abandoned her cart entirely, muttering about being late for work. Thomas moved through the produce section, his trained eye cataloging inefficiencies. Bruised apples mixed with fresh ones, wilted lettuce priced the same as the crisp heads, and, most telling, at least 40 pounds of overripe bananas that should have been marked down yesterday. He pulled out his phone, pretending to check messages while actually calculating the waste. Conservatively, this single store was throwing away $2,000 worth of produce weekly. In the dairy aisle, the situation grew worse. The refrigeration units hummed loudly, working overtime to maintain temperature, while several shelves sat half-empty. He checked the expiration dates on the milk. Some cartons were set to expire in 2 days, yet they were buried behind fresher stock. Classic inventory mismanagement. "Excuse me, sir, can I help you find something?" Thomas turned to find a middle-aged woman in a Harper's apron, her name tag reading, "Sandra, Department Manager." Perfect. He needed to hear from someone with real authority. "Actually, yes," Thomas said, affecting a slight accent to disguise his voice. "I'm new to the area. How do you like working here?" Sandra's smile faltered slightly. "Oh, it's fine. The company's going through some changes, you know? Corporate's been pushing us to cut costs, but they don't understand what it's like down here." "What kind of changes?" "Well, they reduced our staff by 20% last month, but we're still expected to maintain the same service levels. And don't get me started on the new inventory system. It's supposed to be more efficient, but it orders things we don't need and runs us out of bestsellers." Thomas filed this information away. The new inventory system had cost the company $2.3 million to implement, and according to Sandra, it was making things worse, not better. He continued his tour, speaking with employees at every opportunity. The pattern was consistent: hardworking people frustrated by systems that seemed designed to fail. In the bakery, he learned that fresh bread was being thrown away daily because the ordering system couldn't account for seasonal fluctuations. The deli counter was understaffed, creating bottlenecks during lunch hours. Even the cleaning crew was struggling with supplies that arrived sporadically. But it was in the electronics section where Thomas discovered the most troubling revelation. Jake, a college student working part-time, pulled him aside after looking around nervously. "You seem like a nice guy," Jake whispered. "So I'm gonna tell you something. Management's been pushing us to sell extended warranties on everything, even $20 items. They say it's to increase profit margins, but customers hate it. I've seen people walk out rather than deal with the pressure." Thomas's jaw tightened. Extended warranties were pure profit. but aggressive sales tactics were exactly the kind of short-term thinking that destroyed customer loyalty. He had never authorized such a policy, which meant middle management was making desperate decisions without consulting the executive team. As he moved toward the front of the store, Thomas noticed something that made his blood run cold. The customer service desk had a line of 8 people, all holding receipts and looking frustrated. He edged closer, listening to the complaints. Items that rang up wrong, coupons that wouldn't scan, and a return policy that seemed to change daily. "This is ridiculous," fumed a woman in a business suit. "I've been shopping here for 10 years, but if this is how you treat customers now, I'm done. There's a new store opening across town next month, and they actually seem to care about service." A new competitor. Thomas made a mental note to research this immediately. Losing market share to an established chain was one thing, but a startup moving into their territory meant Harper's Grocery was perceived as vulnerable. He selected a few items, bread, milk, cereal, and joined the checkout line, preparing for the final phase of his investigation. This was where the rubber met the road, where all the inefficiencies he'd observed would either be overcome by exceptional service or compounded by poor execution. The line moved slowly. One register was down for maintenance, another cashier was clearly new and struggling with the system, and the third was where things got interesting. Thomas watched as a tall, composed black woman efficiently processed customers, her movements precise and confident. Unlike the frazzled energy he'd observed elsewhere, she seemed to have found a rhythm that worked. She knew regular customers by name, caught pricing errors before they became problems, and somehow managed to make small talk without slowing down the line. But what struck Thomas most was how she observed everything. Her eyes regularly swept the store, taking in details that others missed. When a customer in the produce section looked confused, she discreetly signaled another employee to help. When the new cashier struggled with a return, she offered quiet guidance between customers. This woman understood the business in a way that seemed to escape everyone else he'd encountered. She saw the connections, the patterns, the flow of operations that made the difference between success and failure. As Thomas approached her register, he realized something profound. In a store full of problems, he had found someone who instinctively understood solutions. But would anyone listen to her? The irony wasn't lost on him. Here he was, the CEO of a failing company, about to be helped by someone who might hold the key to saving it, if only he could see past his own assumptions about where wisdom comes from. The automatic doors had welcomed him as a customer, but Thomas Harper was about to discover that sometimes the most valuable insights come from the most unexpected sources. Lisa Washington had been working at Harper's Grocery for 7 years, 2 months, and 16 days. Not that anyone had ever asked, but she kept track of these things. She kept track of a lot of things that others overlooked, like how Mrs. Chen always bought exactly 3 pounds of rice every Tuesday, or how the afternoon shift consistently left the express lane register short on quarters, or how the new inventory system ordered twice as many seasonal items as they actually needed. But Lisa had learned long ago that being observant and being heard were two very different things. "Next customer, please," she called out with practiced professionalism, her voice cutting through the morning bustle. The smile came naturally now, even after countless interactions that reminded her of her place in the world's hierarchy. The customer approaching her register was someone she'd seen before, a woman in her 50s with perfectly styled blonde hair and a designer handbag that cost more than Lisa's monthly rent. Behind her stood 2 younger women, clearly her daughters, both typing furiously on their phones and radiating the kind of impatience that came from never having to wait for anything. "Just these items," the blonde woman said coolly, placing organic vegetables and artisanal cheese on the conveyor belt. She didn't make eye contact, instead focusing on her phone screen. Lisa began scanning the items efficiently, her trained fingers moving with practiced precision. The organic spinach didn't have a clear barcode, so she entered the code from memory, 4090, something she'd memorized along with hundreds of others. "Is that right?" the woman asked sharply, suddenly paying attention. $4.90 for spinach? That seems expensive. It's organic spinach, ma'am. The regular spinach is $2.90 in aisle 3 if you'd prefer, Lisa replied politely, holding up the package so the woman could see the price clearly marked. One of the daughters looked up from her phone, surveying Lisa with barely concealed disdain. Mom, do you really think she knows the difference between organic and regular? I mean, look at her. The comment hit Lisa like a physical blow, but her expression remained neutral. She'd perfected this mask over years of similar encounters. I can double-check the price for you if you'd like, ma'am. The second daughter joined in, emboldened by her sister's cruelty. I bet she doesn't even know what organic means. Probably thinks it's just a fancy word for expensive. Lisa's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. She held a bachelor's degree in business administration from the State University, had graduated summa cum laude, and could probably explain organic certification standards better than most people. But she also knew that defending herself would only make things worse. Should I continue with your order? Lisa asked, her voice steady despite the humiliation burning in her chest. The blonde woman seemed to find the situation amusing. You know, Jennifer, you're probably right. I mean, what could someone like her possibly understand about quality food? She probably eats nothing but processed garbage. Other customers in line began to notice the exchange. Some looked uncomfortable, others simply pretended not to hear. But Lisa felt every eye on her, felt the weight of their assumptions about who she was and what she was capable of. I'm sorry if I've done something to offend you, Lisa said quietly, maintaining her professional demeanor even as her heart raced. I'm just trying to help you with your purchase. Oh, you haven't offended us, the first daughter said with mock sweetness. We're just being realistic about expectations. I mean, no offense, but counting change and scanning barcodes doesn't exactly require a PhD, does it? The cruelty was casual, almost conversational, which somehow made it worse. Lisa had encountered racism before, sometimes overt, sometimes subtle, but the assumption that her job defined her intelligence, her worth, her potential, never got easier to bear. Your total is $23.47, Lisa said, her voice barely above a whisper. As the woman paid, her daughters continued their commentary. I just think people should know their place, you know? Like, she's probably perfectly fine at this job, but let's not pretend she could handle anything more complex. Exactly. Can you imagine her trying to solve real problems? Like business problems? She'd probably suggest putting everything on sale or something equally brilliant. Lisa handed over the receipt, her hands trembling slightly. Thank you for shopping at Harper's. Have a wonderful day. The three women walked away, their laughter carrying across the store like poison in the air. Lisa stood there for a moment, feeling smaller than she had in years. Around her, the store continued its normal rhythm, but she felt exposed, diminished, reduced to nothing more than the uniform she wore and the register she operated. But something flickered in her eyes, not defeat, but a quiet determination. She had weathered storms like this before, and she would weather this one too. Because Lisa Washington had learned that surviving wasn't about what others thought of her capabilities. It was about what she knew to be true about herself. And she knew she was capable of so much more than anyone in this store could imagine. Next customer, please, she called out, her voice finding its strength again. Because no matter how they tried to diminish her, she would not be broken. Not today. Not by them. The afternoon shift brought its own rhythm to Harper's Grocery, and Lisa had settled into the familiar cadence of beeps, thank yous, and the steady flow of customers. The morning's humiliation still stung, but she'd learned to compartmentalize pain, to focus on the task at hand while her mind processed the larger patterns she observed daily. It was 2:47 p.m. when the man in the baseball cap and denim jacket approached her register. Lisa had noticed him earlier during her break, watching him move through the store with an unusual intensity. Unlike most customers who shopped with purpose or browsed casually, this man seemed to be studying everything, the displays, the staff, even the way products were arranged on shelves. Good afternoon, Lisa said warmly, beginning to scan his items: whole wheat bread, organic milk, cereal, and a single banana that looked like an afterthought. Afternoon, he replied, his voice carrying a slight tension that Lisa's trained ear immediately picked up. He seemed distracted, frustrated about something beyond his grocery shopping. As Lisa worked, she couldn't help but notice his hands, soft, well-manicured, not the hands of someone who did manual labor. His clothes were casual but expensive, the kind of dress-down that wealthy people wore when they wanted to blend in. She'd seen it before, though never quite this deliberately. "Paper or plastic?" she asked, but the man didn't seem to hear her. He was staring at something over her shoulder, his jaw clenched in visible frustration. "Sir? Paper or plastic?" "Oh, sorry. Paper is fine," he said, then muttered under his breath. "This whole system is falling apart." Lisa's attention sharpened. Customers complained about long lines or broken equipment all the time, but something in his tone suggested this was different. Bigger. Behind him, two employees were having a heated discussion about inventory shortages. "We're out of the house brand pasta again," one was saying. "Third time this month. But somehow we have 40 cases of that organic stuff nobody buys." The man in the cap turned toward the conversation, and Lisa saw his face tighten with what looked like personal pain. 40 cases? He whispered to himself. 40 cases of dead inventory while we're losing customers to stockouts. Lisa's mind immediately went to work. She noticed the pasta situation herself. The regular customers who came in looking for their usual brand left disappointed, and increasingly, didn't come back. Meanwhile, the expensive organic pasta sat untouched, taking up valuable shelf space and tying up money that could be better used elsewhere. "Your total is $12.38, Lisa said, but the man seemed lost in thought. "It's like they're trying to destroy everything," he continued muttering, pulling out his wallet. "Seven-figure inventory system that can't predict basic demand. Customer satisfaction ratings in free fall. Cost overruns that would make a defense contractor blush." Lisa's hands paused mid-motion. These weren't the complaints of a regular customer. This man was talking about business metrics, financial performance, systemic failures. He spoke with the frustrated authority of someone who cared deeply about the store's success, or failure. "The supply chain is hemorrhaging money," he continued, seemingly unaware that Lisa was listening intently. "Regional distribution centers ordering based on last year's data while customer preferences shift monthly. We're buying winter coats in summer and swimsuits in December." Lisa couldn't help herself. "The seasonal mismatch is particularly bad in electronics," she said quietly. The man's head snapped toward her, surprise flickering across his face. "What?" "The electronics section," Lisa repeated, maintaining her professional tone while bagging his items. "They ordered back-to-school supplies in October, after students had already made their purchases. Then they ran out of holiday electronics in November because the system didn't account for Black Friday demand." For a moment, the man stared at her with an expression Lisa couldn't quite read. "You've noticed that?" "I notice a lot of things," Lisa replied simply. "Like how the produce department throws away hundreds of dollars of fresh items daily because the ordering system doesn't track regional preferences. Or how the deli counter runs out of popular items during lunch rush because the prep schedule is based on national averages, not local patterns." The man's eyes widened slightly. "You've been watching the operational patterns?" Lisa hesitated. She'd already said more than she should have, stepped out of her prescribed role as someone who just scanned items and made change. But something about this man's genuine frustration, his obvious care for the store's problems, made her want to continue. "It's hard not to notice when you're here every day," she said carefully. "The inefficiencies are significant." "Significant," the man repeated, a bitter laugh escaping his lips. "That's one way to put it. The company's bleeding money, customers are defecting to competitors, and nobody seems to understand why." Lisa handed him his receipt, her mind racing. This wasn't just any customer. His knowledge of internal metrics, his personal investment in the store's success, the way he spoke about company-wide problems, pieces of a puzzle were clicking together in her mind. "Have a good day," she said, but her eyes held a question she didn't dare ask. The man took his bag, started to leave, then turned back. You said you noticed things? What else have you noticed? Lisa felt her heart rate increase. This was dangerous territory, but something told her this conversation mattered more than she could possibly understand. I've noticed, she said quietly, that the problems aren't random. They're systematic. And maybe they're solvable. The words hung in the air between them like a challenge. Lisa immediately regretted speaking so boldly. Cashiers weren't supposed to offer business solutions to customers, especially not about company-wide problems. But the man's expression wasn't dismissive. Instead, he looked intrigued, almost hungry for what she might say next. Solvable? He repeated, stepping closer to the register. You think these problems are solvable? Lisa glanced around nervously. The store was busy, other customers were waiting, and she was already pushing the boundaries of appropriate employee behavior. But something about this moment felt crucial, like a door opening that might never open again. I shouldn't be discussing this, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. Please, the man said, and there was genuine desperation in his tone. I need to hear what you're thinking. Lisa took a breath, her analytical mind overriding her caution. The core problem isn't the inventory system itself, it's that the system is working with bad data. It's making decisions based on regional averages and historical patterns that don't reflect current reality. The man nodded slowly, encouraging her to continue. For example, Lisa said, warming to her subject, the system orders winter coats for our region based on sales data from Minnesota stores. But our customers here don't start buying heavy coats until January, not October. So we're stuck with expensive inventory that sits for months while we run out of lighter jackets that people actually want. Go on, the man said, his attention completely focused on her now. Lisa's mind raced, 7 years of observations crystallizing into a coherent vision. What if instead of relying on historical data and regional averages, the system used real-time purchase data from each specific store? Track what customers actually buy, when they buy it, and in what quantities. She gestured toward the register screen. Every transaction generates data, not just what was purchased, but what was returned, what was searched for but not found, what customers asked about but we didn't have in stock. That's valuable information about demand that we're completely ignoring. The man's eyes widened. You're talking about predictive analytics based on local purchase patterns. Exactly, Lisa said, her excitement overcoming her nervousness. But it goes deeper than that. We could track customer preferences by demographics, seasonal variations specific to our location, even weather patterns that affect purchasing decisions. Instead of ordering based on what similar stores sold last year, we order based on what our customers will actually buy next week. That's actually brilliant, the man said, almost to himself. But how would you implement something like that? Lisa had been thinking about this for months, watching waste pile up while customers left disappointed. Start with the top 50 items that drive the most revenue. Track their sales velocity in real time, not weekly or monthly. When an item hits a certain threshold, say 60% of current stock, the system automatically reorders based on local consumption patterns. And the seasonal issues? The system learns seasonal patterns specific to our location. If customers here buy sunscreen in March because of spring break, the system recognizes that pattern and adjusts accordingly. No more ordering swimsuits in December or winter coats in September. The man was staring at her now with an expression that Lisa couldn't quite read. You've really thought this through. I watch the waste every day, Lisa said simply. I see customers leave disappointed because we don't have what they need, while our storage room is full of items nobody wants. It's heartbreaking and inefficient. What about the cost savings? The man asked. Lisa's eyes lit up. Massive. Right now, we're probably carrying at least 30% more inventory than we need, tying up cash in dead stock. With real-time demand prediction, we could reduce inventory levels while improving availability. Less waste, lower storage costs, better customer satisfaction. You're talking about potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars in savings, the man said. Annually, yes. But the real benefit would be customer retention. When people know they can find what they need here, they stop shopping elsewhere. The compound effect of improved customer loyalty would far exceed the direct cost savings. The man stood there silently for a long moment, and Lisa began to worry she'd overstepped. Who was she to lecture a customer about business strategy? She was just a cashier, after all. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "I didn't mean to ramble. I care about this place." "Don't apologize," the man said firmly. That was exactly what I needed to hear." He paused, studying her face. "Have you ever shared these ideas with management?" Lisa almost laughed. "Management doesn't typically ask cashiers for strategic input." "Maybe they should," the man said quietly. He gathered his bag, but hesitated before leaving. "What's your name?" "Lisa. Lisa Washington." "Well, Lisa Washington," he said, extending his hand. "I think you might have just saved the company." As he walked away, Lisa felt a mixture of exhilaration and confusion. Something significant had just happened, but she couldn't quite grasp what. All she knew was that for the first time in years, someone had listened to her ideas, really listened. And for some reason, she had the feeling this conversation was far from over. 3 days later, Lisa arrived at work to find the store buzzing with unusual energy. Managers huddled in urgent conversations, corporate representatives moved through the aisles with clipboards, and the entire inventory team worked with an intensity she'd never seen before. Something big was happening, but nobody was talking about what. "Did you hear?" whispered Maria, the pharmacy assistant, as Lisa clocked in. "Some hotshot consultant supposedly came in with revolutionary ideas about our inventory system. Management's turning everything upside down." Lisa felt a strange flutter in her stomach. "What kind of ideas?" "Real-time inventory tracking, predictive analytics, local demand forecasting, all this fancy tech stuff. They're saying it could save the company millions." The flutter became a full-blown churning. Those weren't just similar ideas to what she'd shared with the mysterious customer. They were her exact words, her specific suggestions. But that was impossible. Wasn't it? As Lisa took her position at Register 3, she noticed something extraordinary happening in the produce section. Instead of the usual mountains of wilting vegetables and overripe fruit, the displays looked precisely curated. Fresh items in appropriate quantities, with clear evidence of demand-based ordering rather than the wasteful overstocking she'd grown accustomed to. "Lisa!" called Kevin from customer service. "You won't believe this. We actually have the pasta brand everyone's been asking for, and we don't have 40 cases of that organic stuff nobody buys anymore." Her heart rate quickened. She made her way to the pasta aisle during her break, and sure enough, the shelves told a completely different story. Popular brands were well-stocked but not overstocked, while the expensive organic varieties occupied appropriately smaller sections. It was exactly what she'd envisioned when she talked about local demand patterns. But the most shocking discovery came in electronics. The section that had been drowning in unsold back-to-school supplies just days ago was now stocked with items that made sense for the season. No more calculators gathering dust in December. Instead, there were gift electronics, phone accessories, and seasonal gadgets that customers actually wanted. "Attention all associates!" crackled the store pay system. "Please report to the main floor for an important announcement." Lisa joined the crowd of employees gathering near the customer service desk, her mind racing with possibilities that seemed too incredible to be true. Store manager Patricia Williams stood beside several people in business suits, including, Lisa's breath caught, the man in the baseball cap from 3 days ago. Except he wasn't wearing a baseball cap now. He wore an expensive suit, his posture commanding, his presence filling the space with an authority that made everything click into place. Lisa's knees went weak as understanding crashed over her. "Ladies and gentlemen," Patricia announced, "I'd like you to meet Thomas Harper, CEO of Harper's Grocery." The crowd erupted in surprised murmurs. Lisa felt like she might faint. She'd been lecturing the CEO of the company about inventory management. She'd criticized his systems, offered unsolicited advice, and somehow, impossibly, he'd listened. I've spent the last 3 days implementing a new inventory management system," Thomas Harper said, his voice carrying easily across the store. "A system based on real-time demand forecasting, local purchasing patterns, and predictive analytics. In just 72 hours, we've seen remarkable results." He held up a tablet displaying charts and graphs. "Inventory waste is down 47%. Customer satisfaction scores have improved by 32%. Most importantly, we've eliminated stockouts on essential items while reducing our overall inventory costs by 28%. The employees applauded, but Lisa barely heard them. She was staring at Thomas Harper, remembering every word of their conversation, every detail of her suggestions that were now being implemented company-wide. "But I didn't develop this system," Harper continued, and Lisa's heart stopped. "The credit belongs to someone else. Someone who saw problems that executive reports had missed, who understood customer patterns that our analysts had overlooked, who demonstrated the kind of operational insight that business schools spend years trying to teach." Lisa felt every eye in the store beginning to turn toward her. This couldn't be happening. This was a dream, a fantasy, some kind of impossible scenario that belonged in movies, not in her real life. "Lisa Washington," Thomas Harper said, looking directly at her. "Would you please step forward?" The crowd parted as Lisa walked toward the front of the store on unsteady legs. She could hear whispers following her. "The cashier? Lisa from Register 3? Are you serious?" As she reached the front, Thomas Harper extended his hand. "Ladies and gentlemen, meet the woman who just saved Harper's Grocery. Lisa Washington, whose insights and innovations have transformed our operations in ways that months of consulting couldn't achieve." The applause was thunderous, but Lisa barely heard it. She was looking at Thomas Harper's face, seeing respect and gratitude that she never imagined possible. "How?" she whispered. "By listening to someone who knew what they were talking about," he replied. "Even when I almost didn't." 2 weeks after the announcement, Harper's Grocery had become the talk of the business community. Trade publications ran articles about the revolutionary inventory breakthrough. Business schools requested case studies, and competitors scrambled to understand how a struggling chain had achieved such dramatic results so quickly. But for Lisa, the most meaningful change was smaller, more personal. She no longer felt invisible. "Lisa!" called Mrs. Chin, approaching Register 3 with her usual Tuesday rice purchase. "I heard about what you did. I'm so proud of you." Regular customers had begun seeking out her register specifically, treating her with a newfound respect that felt both wonderful and surreal. Word had spread throughout the community about the cashier who'd saved the company, and Lisa found herself something of a local celebrity. She was in the middle of helping a customer when she saw them, the blonde woman and her 2 daughters, the ones who had humiliated her just weeks earlier. They entered the store with their usual air of superiority, but something was different in their demeanor as they approached the registers. Lisa watched as they surveyed the checkout lines, clearly debating which one to choose. When their eyes fell on her, she saw recognition flicker across their faces, followed by something that looked distinctly like discomfort. The younger daughter whispered something to her mother, who shook her head dismissively. But their confidence seemed forced now, artificial in a way that hadn't been present during their previous encounter. They chose a different register. Lisa continued with her work, serving customers with the same professionalism she'd always maintained, but she couldn't help stealing glances at the 3 women. They seemed agitated, speaking in hushed tones while shooting occasional looks in her direction. "Excuse me," came a familiar voice. Lisa looked up to see Thomas Harper approaching her register, but this time he wore his business suit and carried himself with the full authority of his position. Behind him walked 2 men in expensive suits, board members, Lisa realized. "Mr. Harper," she said, maintaining her professional composure despite her racing heart. "Lisa, I'd like you to meet James Mitchell and Robert Chin from our board of directors. Gentlemen, this is Lisa Washington, the woman I've been telling you about." The board members shook her hand with genuine warmth, expressing their gratitude for her innovations. As they spoke, Lisa became aware of a growing commotion nearby. The blonde woman and her daughters had moved closer, clearly eavesdropping on the conversation. "Lisa," Thomas said, "I have a proposition for you. We'd like to offer you a position as Regional Operations Analyst, with a starting salary of $85,000 and full benefits. Your insights could help us transform all 47 stores in our region." The offer hung in the air like a thunderbolt. Lisa felt tears prick her eyes, not just from the financial opportunity, but from the validation of her worth, her intelligence, her potential. Behind them, she heard a sharp intake of breath. The blonde woman had gone pale, her daughters staring in open shock. They were finally understanding what they had witnessed weeks ago, not a simple cashier making change, but a brilliant mind solving complex business problems. I'm honored by the offer, Mr. Harper," Lisa said slowly. "But I need to think about it." Thomas looked surprised. "Of course, take all the time you need. But may I ask what's giving you pause?" Lisa glanced around the store, at Mrs. Chen selecting her rice, at Kevin helping a confused customer, at the steady rhythm of commerce that had become her world. "This is my community. These are my people. I've spent 7 years learning how this store works, understanding what our customers need. I'm not sure I want to leave that behind." The blonde woman stepped forward suddenly, her face flushed with embarrassment. "Excuse me," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. We owe you an apology." Her daughters flanked her, looking mortified. The younger one, who had been particularly cruel, spoke first. "We were horrible to you. We said things that were completely wrong. We judged you based on your job, not who you are," the mother added. "We were ignorant and prejudiced, and we're deeply sorry." Lisa looked at them, really looked at them, and saw something she hadn't expected: genuine remorse. They weren't apologizing because they'd been caught or because it was convenient. They were apologizing because they had confronted their own prejudices and found them lacking. "Apology accepted," Lisa said simply. The second daughter stepped forward. "You're amazing. What you did, solving problems that experts couldn't solve, you're brilliant." "I just pay attention," Lisa replied. "That's something anyone can do." Thomas Harper watched this exchange with fascination. "Lisa, your decision about the promotion?" Lisa smiled, a decision crystallizing in her mind. "I'd like to propose a counteroffer. What if I stayed here as a store consultant? I could work with corporate to develop and test new systems, but remain connected to the ground-level operations. Be a bridge between management and the front lines." Thomas grinned. "Brilliant, as always. Same salary, new title, store operations consultant and community liaison." As the board members and CEO departed, Lisa returned to her register. The store continued its familiar rhythm, but everything felt different now. The blonde woman and her daughters had left without making a purchase, but not before each of them had smiled at Lisa with genuine respect. "Next customer, please," Lisa called out, but this time the words carried new weight. She was still the same person, still committed to serving her community, but now the world saw her as she had always seen herself: capable, intelligent, and valuable. Sometimes the most profound changes happen not when we become someone different, but when others finally see who we've always been.